the Strength Beyond Struggle podcast and Ending the Silence program of the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, sponsored by Access. In every episode, we deal with difficult mental health topics, including suicide. So if you're struggling, remember, you can always get help by calling 988. Hey, welcome. Today we are with Lauren Shoemaker on the Strength Beyond Struggle podcast. And I'm your host, Michelle Nelson. And we're here to talk about a mental health condition that is called OCD, or Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. And Lauren's story is unique. You are now a pediatric speech
Yes.
pathologist.
Yes.
Okay. So you go in with little kids and help them to communicate correctly and use their lips and their tongue and their teeth to communicate correctly. And you've always loved language and words, and that helped you. And so our audience, we always ask for you to explain to us, give us a little spiel about who you are, and kind of when you started recognizing things going a little differently than you thought they should.
Yeah. So, yes, I am a pediatric speech language pathologist, a big word to say. And I do work with kids, which I absolutely love. And yeah, so I have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, which, as the name implies, it has both obsessions and compulsions. And it's not a cute little personality quirk. It is a mental health condition it can be debilitating. And, I probably started having symptoms at around age 12, give or take, but somewhere around there. And I think kind of my earliest signs were that I would, wash my hands over and over until they bled, and they'd be raw and bleeding. And, it wasn't because I wanted to, it was because I felt, like I had to, maybe due to a fear of contamination. Yeah, exactly. So the obsessions are like the sticky thoughts in your brain that you get stuck on. And they're oftentimes really against, who you are or what you want. And so the anxiety that you get from these thoughts, then it ramps up and makes you super uncomfortable. And since no one wants to be uncomfortable, then we start doing what we call compulsions, which are the things like maybe the hand washing or whatever it is. But a person with OCD can spend hours upon hours on these routines and obsessions and compulsions and rituals. And so it can be really debilitating, really can affect your quality of life.
I actually just heard of a story about a fireman, and firemen have a really, as we have more plastics in our life and our building, we found that they're getting a lot more cancers from just going and fighting fires. And so they've got a whole routine just to keep the firefighters safe. But this guy would talk about, he'd do one routine after the fire was done, and then he'd do another routine when he got to the station, and then before he got home he'd do another routine, and once he got home he did another routine. It was all designed to keep his clothes clean and keep him clean, and it was the shower, and it was hours of work that he did to make himself feel clean. And that's often something that goes with OCD as well, this fear of contamination, right?
Yeah, and it can also be like, it can be contamination, but it can really latch onto anything. It can surprise you what kinds of things it can latch onto. So it's not just contamination. But I think the big thing is that it really, oftentimes it's like, it's not logical. So the person knows that like what they're doing or the thoughts that they're having, like it's not, you can't out logic it. And a lot of times OCD can be called the doubting disease because it basically makes you just, you're doubting, what you think to be true, your own intuition. And so whatever it latches onto, it can just really, the thought comes and then it just spirals, and then the anxiety and then the compulsions. So yeah, it can latch onto really anything. And so that's why it's so challenging.
And that's why it can be so debilitating, is that, things like this fireman taking this time to do this elaborate routine to stay clean could maybe take away from time he needed for certification or time for doing the general work in the firehouse. Now, I want to reassure people that the National Institutes of Medicine say that only 1.2% of adults in the United States has OCD, has been diagnosed in the last year. And out of that, almost 1.2%. 1.8% are women and just 5% men. So isn't that interesting? Because the last movie I remember with Jack Nicholson, remember he was an OCD guide, and who was that? But he, relocked his door or not. And it's usually men, or you had Monk on TV, was a man. And so do women present differently than men or
I don't actually know on that. I think that's a great question. I honestly don't know, but I think there is a lot of research that still needs to be done on OCD and in a lot of mental health conditions. So it just shows we have a lot more we need to learn.
Absolutely. I mean, I just learned last summer that the National Institutes of Mental Health just mapped every single cell in our brain. We just
Wow.
learned. I know. So what can we do with that? So you're 12 and you're noticing things are different, and the kids are like, "Boy, you're making your hands bleed," and you're like, "I just can't stop." And you keep tripping along through life, and you're doing really well. I mean, you go to college, you told me, and you did it help you get through college? Did it help with the studying? Was it a benefit?
So, I mean, that's a great question. And I would say, OCD has caused so much struggle in my life. So, I wouldn't say it's been helpful in that regard. And I think a common misconception is people say, like, oh, you're so OCD. You probably did great in school because you were so organized. You had everything together. But, the thing is, like, OCD, a lot of times, like, in the community, we say OCD is not an adjective. It did not make my college experience easier, more successful. But I will say that my struggles with OCD have taught me to be a much more caring and empathetic person. And in that sense, now in my career as a speech pathologist, like I feel like I relate to my patients much more because they go through therapy that can be very slow and time consuming, but they do it anyway, and they have these invisible disabilities often, and a lot of them do struggle with anxiety as well, even at a young age. So I feel that my experience helps me to better connect with them and understand what they're going through.
And you mentioned, because I was doing some research before, because to me, OCD is, I just kind of like, is it nature or nurture? And it's really hard. And it sounds like it's a little of both, that there's a mixture of it's just the right combination.
It's such a puzzle. It really is. And, I wish we knew more. I hope we learn more because I hope, we always need to know more, right? So, yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Yeah.
So you made I mean, because you were doing, I mean, you didn't really get a diagnosis, you told me, until you're 27.
Mhm.
And a lot of my other guests get diagnosis around the age of 14, which is generally when a mental health condition shows up so badly that it affects the ability to function in life, which kind of is that breaking point, correct? With a
Yeah.
mental health condition, like, is this getting in the way of me enjoying or living my life or accomplishing what I
Mhm.
want to do in my life? So
Yes.
what was it? Why did you wait till 27 to figure
Yeah.
that?
That's such a good question. I think for me, part of it was like I did, even though I was struggling for a long time with these things, with these obsessions and these compulsions. I mean, a lot of them are very internal, and some are external too. But sometimes you're just having this internal battle in your head, even. And so, I did excel in school. I did really well throughout my, all my schooling. Went to college, and even though again I did struggle, it wasn't that I didn't, but I think it's really that you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think we just didn't really, I didn't know any different really. And other people looking on the outside might have thought, hey, she's doing fine, but didn't know necessarily what I was going through. And so finally, there was just a point where I kind of started to realize, like, okay, I think something is going on. But still, even then, there's so much stigma around mental health conditions. I mean, I think we are coming a long way, but there is so much stigma. And so there was kind of that fear of like, what if I, get a label, get a diagnosis? I don't want to feel different. I don't want to think that there's a problem. But ultimately, it came to the point where it was like, okay, I really do need this help because I want to be better and I want to live my life. And that's when I decided to seek help. And I did get really lucky because I did go to an OCD specialist straight away. And from what I hear, just kind of in the community in general, that's not always the case. A lot of people go somewhere else and maybe don't get the right treatment, and it can just postpone things even longer.
So, do you have a situation, say, either in high school or in college or sometime in your adult life, that you could give as an example to folks who think, maybe I'm OCD because I really like to have all my soups in one place and my, my whatever else in the other place. And I'm just got a very organized cabinet. Is
Mhm.
that something to worry about? So, when you talk about these, were the obsessions more of a problem or the compulsions?
I think the big thing is that it really is when it's affecting a person's quality of life, and it's oftentimes not what that person wants. Intrusive thoughts are things that every person has. We all have intrusive thoughts, every single one of us. The thing with OCD is kind of like I was saying earlier, the thoughts get stuck and then they become obsessions. And oftentimes these thoughts then they get blown out of proportion. And a lot of times, the person knows that they're not logical, but they give them so much value and feel a need to respond, hence the compulsion. So, like an example for me of like intrusive thoughts that then became obsessions, I have one that I still have from time to time where it's like when I swallow, a very natural human process, right? When I swallow, I tell myself that if I think a bad thought, something bad's going to happen to someone. And logically, like I know, like I'm not this like talented, magical being that can make things happen with my thoughts, but the thought just feels so real to the person. And so because of that, the compulsions might be, trying not to swallow, which is impossible to do. And also literally sometimes it's just that internal battle of trying to undo the thought, trying to unthink the thought, trying to make it more positive. But I mean, the thing with OCD is it's never enough and you can't control your thoughts. Another one that I have is like I'll be driving down the road and I go over a pothole and again, I know it's a pothole, but suddenly OCD has really convinced me that I ran over a dog in the road. And so the compulsion is for me, either it could be replaying the thought over and over. I mean, this could be hours that you're spending, and you might not even see that on the outside. Or sometimes I'm driving around in circles looking for any evidence. Again, I know it wasn't, but it feels so real because that anxiety. And so I'll just be driving. But the hard thing about it too is it's this vicious cycle because I start driving in circles and then I go over another pothole. Then I've convinced myself I ran over another animal. So, the thing is that with OCD, it is very counterintuitive. And the more reassurance you seek, it doesn't help because you're always going to find a loophole. It is so sneaky. It really is.
Wow, that's actually kind of a mean thing
Mm-hmm.
to for your brain to do
Yes.
to you.
Yes.
That's
Very
not very
mean.
kind at all.
I know.
I
And
mean,
that's why it's so hard. And that's why we really want to represent OCD because there is so much stigma even around OCD where, I mean, you hear people say, hey, like you're so OCD because you like to keep everything in a row. And, OCD can present in different ways, but I mean, it is debilitating to that person and, whatever it is. And it could be perfectionism, but it's not like, hey, I like to have things be perfect. It's like this, it just tears you apart basically, like it feels like it has to and it feels so real and you're doing compulsion, so yeah, it can be very mean
vicious cycle that you're caught in,
cycle.
and that sounds very uncomfortable. And so um now you are married and your
Yes.
husband's been very supportive because you kind of went through this, and not many of our guests have had a partner like that.
Mm.
So um I've often, and I've been through my own therapy for my own mental health issues and helped my daughter through hers. And it's always for me been good to I have a wonderful husband who I can come to and in a safe space say, I worked on this in therapy and I'm not sure, or I need help with this, what I do. And so how has your husband played a role in your recovery?
Yeah, so my husband's been a wonderful support system for me and I'm so thankful for that. After I got diagnosed with OCD, he read a book about it. He started to gain more knowledge so that he knew how to better help me. And he even participated in a few therapy sessions with me. And I would highly recommend for anyone going through therapy to try to do some sessions with your family or your partner if you can. With OCD, a hard part is that, like I was saying earlier, the reassurance when I'm stuck in an obsession actually feeds the OCD more. So it's natural to want to give your loved one comfort and reassurance. But with my OCD, my husband has had to learn how to respond during my times of crisis in a way that still shows he cares, but it also doesn't feed my OCD. And that is not easy. So I'm just really thankful that he took the time to learn about OCD. And also, he supports me in my advocacy projects, my creative writing group, writing my book. And so, because of that, like those things have helped me so much in my recovery and are things that he supported me. I think every mental health condition is different. So I just encourage family members and partners to educate yourselves, to get involved in your family's or your loved one's therapy if you can, and really just to show them you care. Like that makes such a world of a difference.
that's kind of what we're doing, and we're talking here because of the National Alliance on Mental Illness Ending the Silence program
Hmm.
we're both part of. I'm an adult presenter and I give the boring stats, and you get to tell the fun story. And I know you've done it in front of family groups, which has probably been really, I haven't done as many family groups. How has it been to have both, family and their loved ones with them?
I think it's been really great. It usually has been more just like either the adults kind of attending separately or like the kids attending separately. But I really think that it is so critical that we're getting the word out to people. And I just love ending the silence because our mission to speak to youth and families around mental health and I don't want people waiting till they're 27 years old like me for something that's common and treatable, that there is hope. So like I love that we can get the message out to our kids earlier through our program. And it's great being able to see like families that also want to learn and be involved.
Like your husband. And
Yes.
so, could you talk a little bit about the therapy and what is effective with OCD? So if people find that they're having like these obsessive thoughts. And I like your example of, driving around the block going, did I hit that animal? Did I hit that animal? And then you can think your husband being in the car going, I can't, support this thought because it was a pothole. And it's not healthy for me to reassure you that it's not an animal. You're not going to believe me. I'm
Mhm.
not sure how he does that. But so what, if someone finds themselves with these thoughts, maybe it's, you think there's, I don't know, something coming to get you from under your bed, maybe a little kid would feel that and can't get rid of that thought. I don't know, is that kind of the thing that they would be? I'm just trying to help people in the audience understand what are the signs and symptoms and what is an effective way to deal with those?
Yeah. So again, I think it can attach to really anything. So it'd be hard to say. Obviously, if there are concerns out there, I recommend going to a therapist and looking into it. But, and there's lots of treatments out there for OCD. For me, what worked for me was something called ERP, exposure response prevention. And as the name says, essentially you are exposing yourself to your fears, to the things that you're afraid of. And then the big thing is with OCD treatment, from what I've learned, is it's not so much the thought, because we all have thoughts. We all have, and we can't control our thoughts, right? But what it is it's the response to the thoughts. So exposure response prevention is like, you're going to expose yourself to these fears. And maybe we make a hierarchy of like, where do we start? Where do we end? But then the response is where we have to kind of put a stop and be like, okay, how can we sit with this uncomfortable feeling? And how can we kind of have a different relationship with the anxiety that we're feeling in the moment. So it's very hard. But I have graduated from therapy and I still struggle. But my recovery is not linear. We go up and down. We have good days and bad days. But like for me, I think just changing my relationship with the anxiety and not running away from it as much. I still struggle, but trying my best not to. And, just really kind of even letting those scary, exposing myself even on purpose sometimes and saying, you know what, you're going to sit with this uncomfortable feeling. You're going to do it anyway. And actually that's how we're living our life, right? By not giving in to the anxiety. So for me, that's kind of what I did. And it took, I was in therapy for a few years. So it took some time, but for me, it's been really a gift to be on the other side of it now.
Well, and they say that looking at the research, that talk therapy is kind of the gold standard for OCD. And the exposure and response prevention therapy, they said works well, but some people need some medication sometimes, like SSRI uptake inhibitors, specifically with serotonin. And so medication is something that can work as well, and to not be afraid of it, right? Because a lot of
Yeah,
people,
so I think those are good points. I personally, I don't know, there's probably a lot of information out there. I haven't really found much on talk therapy per se. I've
well,
definitely seen a lot on ERP, so that's kind of where I've heard is the gold standard ERP. There are medications out there too. So I would say like if I were looking into an OCD program, I would be looking for ERP, and then, you can talk with your doctor about medications and things like that and see what's going to work for you. But ERP has been kind of like the gold standard. And so, kind of, looking for programs with that if you do have concerns about OCD. That hopefully will help people, because sometimes what happens is people will go into maybe a talk therapy or something else, and not necessarily talk therapy, but just other programs where they
right.
weren't seeking, if they had OCD, they weren't maybe getting the appropriate treatment for OCD. And sometimes that can hinder things, obviously. So,
Because it's mixed with anxiety.
mhm.
It's very closely related to that. I think, and anxiety and depression are on each other. And so there's these layers and it's really
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
know. But basically, I guess in NAMI we always say if it's affecting your ability to do your life, that's when you're
Hmm.
like, okay, we need some help.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
And you talked a little bit about sitting with the anxiety, and you mentioned this. You mentioned your writing and what you do
Mhm.
now. So, because I mean, as I understand, a lot of our guests talk about how recovery also they bring into it some self care, and it sounds like for you, writing is kind of self care. Can you explain to our audience how that works for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think creative expression, whatever it is that you love doing, it really is a great outlet. For me, I've just kind of always loved creative writing, and it's just a nice way to kind of use your brain in a different way. But I think for me too, it's not necessarily the act of writing; it's more the community that I've found through it. That's really been my big thing. But I think writing is great. Journaling is great too. I haven't really done it as much as I would like. I'd like to do more, but I think whatever you're interested in, it's so great to explore those avenues. And it is a part of self care and self compassion. Self care and self compassion are so important when you're struggling with a mental health condition, even when you're not. We all, need more self care in our lives, I feel. So doing the things you enjoy, it is so important. And it's always a good thing to take that time.
And you mentioned that you found a community with your writing, and
Mhm.
you have taken the interesting step to join with other people with the what international. Oh,
Yeah, the International OCD Foundation. Yeah.
correct. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to bring that into your life and how it's helped you?
Yeah. So, I don't remember exactly when I started like connecting with the IOCDF, which is the International OCD Foundation. But I think for me it was kind of like once I found out I had OCD, I kind of felt so alone at first. I was like, no, I don't know anyone who has OCD, and so I'm guessing I did a Google search. I don't remember exactly how I got connected, but I'm so glad I did because somehow I found this community, and it is a huge community, and there are just so many people who are also struggling with OCD. But what I find so empowering is that like a lot of them are advocates, because I feel like once you start getting into, you find out you have a mental health condition, and it is such a challenge. And then you have this purpose and this mission to advocate. A lot of people do, and it's just really amazing to see that. And so they've inspired me, but also the IOCDF connects to like conferences and education. And like we were saying earlier, like there's so much more research that's needed and so much more education. So I feel like that is just it's an amazing thing to know that that's happening out there, that people are trying to find answers to all these things.
And so you actually run a creative writing kind of, would you call it a therapy group or just a support group or just a interest, or I'm not sure what you would define it as, but can you tell us, because as I do these podcasts, a theme keeps repeating with the recovery of mental health, and that's community. And you've
Mhm.
mentioned that word too. So could you explain to us a little bit why, Americans right now, we have a crisis of loneliness and isolation, especially after the pandemic. And so you're actually suggesting do the opposite. And so can you tell us what's the compelling reason to come out of your shell and connect with others?
Mhm. Yeah. So, I host it's a virtual creative writing group. I'd call it like a special interest group. So it is for adults with OCD, but we really don't talk about OCD in our group, because it's really about using our brain in different ways. And it's just really about creativity and being together in this space. It's definitely about community as well. I will say that unfortunately, OCD can convince people not to do creative projects. So it could be maybe because they have obsessions about it needing to be perfect. Again, I want to emphasize it's not like a positive personality thing for people with OCD. It's actually detrimental, and it keeps them from doing the things they want to do. So participating in a creative writing group and doing it anyway is a great opportunity to face anxiety. And there was even a point. So basically, in our group, we do like little we'll come up with group exercises, maybe, or like warm ups and writing prompts that we do. And then we just spend time writing. But we even did a group once on like imperfect writing where we purposefully wrote with errors and imperfections. And like that was such a cool opportunity. And what's amazing is that in a lot of ways, it actually even made the writing better. So I just feel like having this group has made me so much more connected and so much less alone.
I love what you just said because and just through this thing that you love that you've connected with these other people and that you also give each other the grace and the understanding that you all are struggling with thoughts that are debilitating. And so I mean, is there anything else you would want to tell our audience? Like, does this help you connect with the kids? And you said that your OCD has helped you to be more empathetic and better at your job. And so by embracing your mental health, has that made you a better life for you or fuller life? Or what has been the benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really has just helped me. I mean, just, my struggle with OCD has been, again, such a challenge, but like I was saying, like you were saying, I do feel like I've built much more empathy. I've grown much more empathy from the experience. So it does help me as a human being, like just understand people more. And I do think that, as I was saying earlier, like my relationship with anxiety has changed, like through my therapy and through what I've done. And so, like even for example, doing this talk right now, like I'm anxious, and but I do it anyway because like that's what I've learned through my therapy and my experience, and my mission of wanting to share my story is just so much greater than that fear. So I'm learning to live with my values, and I think I'm also learning that, like, because OCD really, it craves certainty, and we can't have that, with anything in life, really. So I'm learning how to just balance that more and live my life because there's no certainty with anything, and that's really hard for anyone. But and it's still a work in progress, obviously. But I think my struggles have again given me much more purpose too in my life.
And I'm thinking that at a future time, I almost want to get you and your dad because you're writing a book about mental
Yes.
health for kids. You're aiming for what the second, third, fourth grade level to I've understood, that level.
Yeah, so hopefully I it's we're like, hey, anyone who wants to read it. But yeah, it's probably more towards like, I would say that level. Yeah.
And so, but it's the same idea that you were talking about of putting anxiety in its place. Because
Mm-hmm.
I know in my life until I went through therapy and put the anxiety in the back seat of the car, I'm the driver. I get to decide where I want to go. But anxiety is always lurking back there. But I'm like, and that's kind of what your book talks about too. At a level that kids can understand because you're right. Anxiety doesn't have to be your enemy,
Mm-hmm.
And what is the book? Can you tell us just a little bit about it? This book that
Yeah,
you're
definitely. Yeah, so my dad and I are working on this children's book. We're super excited any day now. Hopefully, it's going to be on Amazon. And it's been such a fun process just doing this with my dad. But our book is called Ollie the Owl and the Unexpected Visitor. And it's about a cute little owl who suddenly has an unexpected visitor, which is this like shadowy figure that's mean and always saying cruel things to him. And he comes to find that this unexpected visitor is actually his anxiety. And the mean words he hears are his own thoughts. And they're very distressing. And the shadowy figure in the book is called Rob, which was inspired by a therapy assignment I did, where I was to give my OCD a name to separate it from myself. And I call my OCD Rob because it can rob my life of the things I enjoy if I let it. So, anyway, through the story, Ollie learns that with the help of his best friend, family, therapist, and building himself up with positive affirmations instead of cutting himself down, he can learn to live alongside this unexpected visitor instead of fighting it. And he can say hello to it instead of pushing it away. And he can still live an amazing life, even with Rob by his side. And he also learns through talking to his best friends and even his therapist that many of us are struggling with something, even if it isn't always visible or obvious, and that talking about our struggles can help us connect and hopefully find more peace.
And right there is exactly why you said that doing something creative is and it's probably just an idea that your dad and you had. You said Allie the Owl has been in your family for a long time, and it's just a compilation of all these ideas. But right there, that story kind of encapsulates all we're trying to do with Ending the Silence and with NAMI is to walk with each other and support each other and educate each other that we're okay and we're not alone
Mm-hmm.
and together we can get through this. So Wow, Lauren. Thank you so much. I hope that people hearing this feel some hope, because to be lost in those thoughts sounds really scary and very lonely.
Yeah, definitely.
And I so appreciate that you did face your anxiety today and come to speak to us.
Yes, me
Come back.
too.
Courage is contagious, and you're very patient with the technology. Thank you much. So I look forward to seeing you out there talking to families and kids again, because you have a great story and a great presence. And I look forward to finding your book soon.
Yes, thank you. We're excited.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Do you like to keep your hands clean? Do you pay close attention to details? Do you dot every I and cross every T? Does that make you obsessive? Maybe even compulsive? Well, that depends. Ask yourself, how does it interfere with your life? Can you not stop thinking frightening thoughts? Can you not get things done? Things like holding a job. If you're that impacted, you might have obsessive compulsive disorder. But OCD is like a lot of other mental health challenges, surprisingly hard to diagnose. Just ask Lauren. As a child, her family supported her, which kept her OCD tendencies more or less under control. No one worried about her odd priorities and her meticulous habits. It just ensured she got her homework done and came home with A's. But after she got married, her OCD became a problem. You see, obsessions and compulsions are two different things, often yoked to anxiety or depression. Obsessions are thoughts you can't control. That includes things like the fear of losing something or aggressive thoughts towards yourself or others. You might even have unwanted, intrusive thoughts about taboo subjects. Compulsions are things you can't stop doing. That could include checking the oven over and over again to make sure it's off, compulsively counting cars on the highway, or helplessly arranging cans in the cabinet in a very precise way. But remember, lots of people are very particular and detail oriented. That includes me. In actuality, OCD is very rare. Only 2% of women and 0.5% of men report OCD symptoms in a given year. However, of that small group, 84% say the condition disrupts their life. Lauren would agree. The National Institutes of Health website offered this checklist to help you understand if you have OCD. You can't control the thought or behavior even though you know it's excessive. You spend more than an hour a day on these behaviors. You get no pleasure from the OCD, although it may relieve anxiety. You have problems in daily life due to the OCD patterns. Scientists are still trying to figure out the cause of this disorder. Genetics may play a role. Imaging studies have shown unusual activity in brain areas that control emotion and fear in those with OCD. But childhood trauma can also play a role. There are 4 or 5 major treatments developed to lessen the condition and allow one to live their best life. Lauren is an example. She went to specialized therapy, then developed strategies that saved her marriage and made her successful. She also joined NAMI and its Ending the Silence program to tell her story. NAMI shows you there's help and hope. So don't suffer alone. Get the help you need to live your best life. And that all starts with ending the silence. Thank you for joining us.
It's okay to just be me. We're all made to be unique. It's okay to have my needs. It's okay to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently. Doesn't make me broken. It just makes me me. People out there help me through, ones who care about me and you. Through my struggles I find my strength. Feels so good to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently. Doesn't make me broken, it just makes me me. People helping me to get through have their own struggles too. Even though they have their strength, they are human like me. Through these struggles we build our strength. We all want to feel healthy. Even though we make mistakes, struggles build our strength.